video purposes. That was always fun. All right, so today is lesson 1 of COMP2084 server-side scripting. It's I've actually got 3 sections of the course: Tuesday section for Lakehead, a Wednesday section for computer programmer, and our section for interactive media is on Monday. So, of course, will get repeated, but I'll do it a little bit differently for each section. Yes, Justin, 2020 really just has been the year from hell. No questions. So I'll try and keep the chat open. One thing I'm going to highly recommend, actually I'll come to this in the syllabus. So I'm saying our class is scheduled for 11 a.m. We may not do a full 3-hour class. I know 3 hours is a long time for a single class when, I mean, even in a classroom, normally you can get up, you can move around, you can chat with the person next to you. So depending on how we kind of get through the content, I may try to keep classes a little closer to 2 hours, and we'll probably take a break every 50 minutes or so that everybody doesn't go too crazy. Okay. So in this class, basically, we're looking at using web programming in the Microsoft world. So we're using the .NET framework. Who is this session for? Well, Diana, most of the students in this section are in the interactive media design program, but there may be some students who are in computer programmer. It's the same course, so it doesn't matter really whether you're in the Monday or the Wednesday section. Which program are you in, Diana? Are you in web? We will come to that, Justin. We'll talk about the software in a minute. Okay. So basically everything you need is going to be on Blackboard. Best way to reach me, obviously, is email. Okay, computer programmer is just fine. Diana, I don't think you're the only programmer student in this section. So we'll have class on Mondays. I've got 4 hours of office hours. So Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 12, and you can book appointments, and this link is also on Blackboard through Calendly, so you can book a 15-minute appointment. If you need something, if these times don't work for you, then you can email me and we can try to set up an alternate appointment if necessary. So just book one appointment at a time, and I guess come prepared so we make the best use of it. The other thing I ask, if you book an appointment through the Calendly link, it automatically adds that appointment to my Outlook calendar and yours and blocks off that time. So if you suddenly don't need it, let's say you have a question or a problem and you figured it out, you don't need the appointment anymore, make sure you remove it and delete it from Calendly so that it clears out that spot and opens it back up on my calendar. So I know most of you, not all of you. Tell you a bit about myself. So I've been teaching here at the college since 2010, and mostly I teach web programming, and as well I teach sometimes I've taught the database course, I've taught project management, I teach Android development, but web is my focus, and I've been a web developer for over 20 years, and ASP.NET is actually the technology I use the most. So it's the one I typically choose in my own kind of private business life. So I've taught this course a lot. Don't claim to be an expert, but I have some experience. I have a solid plan as to what we're going to do with this course. We can also talk a lot about looking at real life examples and real life context of other applications that use ASP.NET that relate to what we're going to do in class. I'll try to be really clear about the standards and expectations I set out for you. And I'm certainly open to your feedback. Obviously, a full online course, it's kind of a new world for us. So you may have some suggestions. We may have to make some adjustments as we go along. That's fine. I'm a student myself. I'm doing my master's degree right now online through Ontario Tech. So I know what it's like to be a current student, and I know what it's like to learn in a fully online environment. So I am sympathetic to some of the challenges that you guys have. In terms of the communication, I will generally respond. You can expect email responses during the school week within 24 hours. Okay? If you email me Friday night or over the weekend, may not get a response until Monday. I'm trying to live a life and not be tethered to my digital technology. So usually in the evenings and on the weekends, I try to get away from my computer, put my phone down as much as I can. So you may not get a response, especially in the evenings. I also have class a couple nights a week in the evenings. So Tuesdays and Thursday nights, I'm in class myself, which means I don't really have a chance to respond to email then. So that's what you can expect from me. To succeed in the class, you need to go through the lessons regularly. I think you probably get more out of it if you do sit in on the Monday sessions. I will also try to have some kind of small group discussions. We can't really do that in WebEx yet. I think we'll be able to soon, but we may flip over to using Microsoft Teams because, and I've already set up some groups there because it has the ability to have small group real-time discussion, not just in the chat, but in the video. Yep, sure, Justin, go ahead. You can also turn on your mic if that's easier to ask your question. I just have to check my audio because I'm not sure it's working. That's interesting. You have 6 courses, but 8 course links on Blackboard. No, I don't think so. Right, yes. So Jessica, because fall is her semester, her vacation semester, she's on vacation in November and December. So she's going to be teaching the first half of the class, and then you have a separate instructor for the second half of that course. So, you know, other things I think that are going to help you succeed, ask for help. Like, I'm certainly available to help. We've got a peer tutor. We have student advisors. We have lots of people who can help in the class. Also, make sure you start your assignments early because that way you're giving yourself time to get help. Certainly, you want to do all the assignments and submit them on time, and don't share any of your work. All these things are going to be key to you earning enough grades to get through the course. One other thing I'm going to mention on here that I should have added on here is, if at all possible, I would recommend having a second monitor for the class, because whether you're following in real time in the synchronous classes or you're doing the lessons on your own time where you're watching the YouTube screencasts, being able to see my screen on one display and then work in your code editor on the other is going to be much more efficient than trying to do everything on a single screen. And I speak from experience. Over the summer, I did a lot of tutorials on LinkedIn Learning to try and brush up on some of my knowledge, learn some new things. And trying to do those when I wasn't in my home office with the second screen, it took a long time. So I'd strongly recommend get a second cheap monitor any way you can, because it's going to help you not only in this class, but in your other courses as well. Yep, there you go. If it's your iPad, sure. But I strongly, strongly recommend that in order to do a full semester of online learning, that having a second monitor is going to make your life immeasurably easier. In terms of the assignments, this is how your grade breaks down. I've gotten rid of the midterm exam in this class. One, just to help make the adjustment to fully online a little bit easier. The other thing is our semester is also a week shorter this semester. So rather than lose a class for a midterm, I decided I would rather have a lesson instead and just kind of distribute that 15% that usually goes into the midterm into your other assignments. So you have 5 assignments that you can see on my screen. those total 45%, and that's basically one web project you're going to build through the entire semester, but it's broken down into pieces, so no one part is worth any more than 15%. Okay. We will have weekly review quizzes starting next week, and those will be multiple choice, fairly similar to the kind of questions we had for PHP. Although in our PHP quizzes, everyone got the same 5 questions. In this class, I've made up a pool of 8 to 10 questions per week, and you're going to get a random selection of 5 of those. And in the PHP class, the quiz mark was only worth 10%. In this class, partly to compensate for the fact we have no midterm, the quizzes are worth 20%. So each weekly quiz is worth 2%. And I'll explain when those are due. We'll also do some in-class exercises, and some of these will be worth a mark, but really it's just a mark for completing it. So these would be the kinds of things that we would be doing if we were in class together. So I've taken some of these, tried to convert them to simple online activities that are not time consuming, and simply, so long as you complete the activity, you get a mark. So that's kind of 10 easy percent. And again, you can do those in real time on a Monday morning when we're together, or you can do those on your own time. And then our last week of class, we'll have an online final exam. That'll be a practical open book exam where you have 3 hours just to simply build something. Okay. You do need to get a 50 to pass the course. And in terms of due dates, everything is going to be due at 5 o'clock on Sunday. So 5 o'clock the day before we have a class. So for example, our first quiz, which will open next week at the end of class, you'll have until the Sunday, next Sunday at 5 o'clock to complete it. So this means and same if we do those in-class learning activities, if you do them in class when we're all together, that's great. If you want to learn on your own time, you still have until Sunday to complete that activity. Okay? And late submissions for any activity or assignment are 20% per day. Okay? If you do need extra time, you're sick, you have an emergency, please let me know what it is with appropriate documentation if possible, and we can work out some alternate arrangement. There are no makeup assignments in the course, however, so you've got plenty of opportunities to earn marks with the 5 or 6 graded learning activities, the 5 assignments, and the quizzes. Yeah, Justin, I'm going to make everything due at 5 p.m. That will be the due date. Maggie, if that says September 28th, yeah, that's the week of September 28th when that assignment is due. So the actual due date is September 27th at 5 p.m. Okay. So Justin, yes, the answer is 5 o'clock. I don't really want you up working till midnight and then having to come to class the next day. Okay. And please be sure, I dealt with this a lot. Last semester was one of the worst semesters I've ever had for dealing with academic misconducts. I think I had processed 16 of them in my classes. I know Jess this semester had even more. So the minimum penalty is a grade of 0. So you're going to have to do your own project for the semester-long project. Every student is going to have to build something that's different. Okay. And I do check your work really carefully. If you submit work that looks like it may have been copied either from another student or online, then we have a code review where we have an online private meeting. You need to have your microphone and a working web camera on, and you'll need to answer questions and explain the work that you've submitted. And any work you've submitted, you should be able to understand and explain. So here's our schedule. So we'll just kind of do a light introduction today. We'll kind of do a 1,000-foot view of ASP.NET, and we'll play around with it a little bit. We won't do anything too heavy. Then next week in class, we're going to set up an application that we're going to build together over the course of the semester. We'll build an e-commerce store, an online store using ASP.NET, kind of similar to the way if you were in my PHP class, we built out that music library, one application that we built together and we added features on week after week. So we're going to do the same thing. So we'll have a big kind of robust, fully featured .NET application by the end of the semester. Also, so your first assignment 1A, it's really simple. I'll give it out to you next week, but it's basically just a project plan. You're going to submit a very short Word document, just basically telling me what are you going to build for your semester project. So that's all that is. You don't have to submit code for your first assignment. So then assignment 1B, that's when you have to have the first kind of working version of your ASP.NET site where users can create, read, update, and delete data. Then we'll get into authentication. We'll have a week off, the beginning of November. And then after reading week, you'll add security to the project. And then down into December, we'll add unit testing and an API into our final test. So these are just some details about this semester. A lot of this stuff doesn't apply because we're not really on campus. So in terms of things like campus closures, well, none of this really matters. If you do need to go to campus for any reason, you do need to install the Safe at Georgian app and complete the COVID assessment on the day you go into campus. I'm probably not really going to be on campus at all. So we're going to try to do everything remotely. Justin, I know you did ask a question about software and operating systems. I haven't forgotten. I will come back to that. Does anybody have any questions about the syllabus and kind of plan for the course before we get into that?
I had a question. So talking about academic misconduct, so let's say, for example, we're struggling with some coding and everything, and we try to look for resources online, maybe like from Lynda or YouTube. Is it considered as an academic misconduct or like cheating or plagiarism?
No, but here's what I'm going to do. Here's what we'll do around that, Emily. Let me just open. I was actually just working on the assignment 1 document yesterday. So just to be sure, because that is certainly a reasonable thing to be able to do. So here's what I'm going to ask. You can see this section and I will add this. So if you want to use code that you find from another source, I ask you to do it, but there's a few rules around it. Number 1 is you put a link to it with a comment in your code. Okay, so if you found something on Lynda or Stack Overflow you want to use, you should link to it. Number 2, it shouldn't be more than 10% of your project. Like you can't just find a tutorial with the source code and take the whole thing, right? But you could take pieces that help you. So you should comment it. And the other thing is just check with me by email. So if you find something that you want to include in your project from another source, send me the link, send me the code you want to use, and just make sure that it's okay. So totally fine to find external code so long as it sort of follows these guidelines. Is that fair enough? Emily, does that make sense?
Yeah, I just commented on the chat. I said yes, thank you.
Oh, okay, sorry, yes.
No, it's okay, no problem.
Yeah, and same with, yeah, YouTube, whatever it is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that is a good question, and yes, I don't want to discourage you from learning independently, but absolutely just give credit to where you're getting that code from. Anybody else have any other questions about kind of like our plan for the class? Okay. So I'm going to hop over to Blackboard, and we'll just talk about what tools you'll need for the course. So inside of weekly learning, we've got a tools and resources folder. So I've got the link here. So we're going to use WebEx for now. We may wind up switching to Microsoft Teams later on, just because, as I said, Teams allows breakouts. And I've actually put everybody into a learning group, an activity group. So that will be when we have small group learning activities, you'll be working with people in those groups. So it's not for the large assignments, just for doing some in-class activities in smaller groups. The link to the YouTube channel is here, so I have a separate playlist for each section. So I've got a playlist for our Monday class, so it'll be different from the playlist from the Wednesday and Tuesday classes. All the source code of anything we do in class will be uploaded to GitHub, so I'll make a repository. I'm not going to do it this week because we're not doing really any code that you really need, but I'll set up a repository next week. The link for the office hours booking is here. So now we come to software. So Justin, I'm going to come, sorry, it took me a long time to answer your question. Do you need Windows for this course? No, you used to, but Visual Studio is now platform independent. So you can run it on a Mac if you want to. The one thing you can't run on a Mac is SQL Server Management Studio. This is Microsoft's database software that's similar to MySQL Workbench. There's no Mac version of that. Technically, you don't need that program. You can do everything through Visual Studio if you like. So if you want to just install Visual Studio on OS X, that's fine. I find Management Studio makes life easier. So you can use any version of Visual Studio. I think most of you already have Visual Studio. Doesn't matter if you've got 2017 or 2019. Doesn't really matter if you have enterprise, professional, or community, as long as you have some version. The one thing you do need, though, and you can see in the screenshot, in the middle here, where it says web and cloud, you need these two elements checked, the ASP.NET web development and Azure development. So the way to check if you have those installed, if I just search for the VS install, the Visual Studio installer, I'm hoping this isn't going to ask me to update my Visual Studio, but it might. I may have to let this go and come back in a bit. Oh yes, you can now run WordPress on .NET Core. I don't know exactly why you'd want to, but you can. So you see latest news in ASP.NET here. So here's my version of Visual Studio Enterprise. If I click on Modify, it will show me which components I've installed. So these two components at the top under Web and Cloud, we want to make sure that ASP.NET Web Development and Azure Development are checked. If these aren't checked, you want to check them off, and then you'll get an install button down here. So without these, you have Visual Studio installed, but the templates for creating web projects won't be installed in your version. So you'll want to modify your installation. I'll show you that one more time. So you open the Visual Studio installer, you find your version. I have both 2017 and 2019, and you click modify, and make sure you select ASP.NET Web Development and Azure Development. And then you'll have an install button here, or install while downloading. Doesn't really matter. You just want to make sure you install those. I've also explained where to get SQL Server. This is the database server, as well as SQL Server Management Studio. Again, this is Windows only. It's like MySQL Workbench. We don't need that for a couple of weeks, but sometime over the next maybe 2 weeks, you'll want to install SQL Server and Management Studio. So you can get SQL Server from the Azure for Education portal, and Management Studio you can actually just get directly from Microsoft. If you are a Mac user, so Justin, this is for you, you can use, they do have Azure Data Studio, which is kind of like a light version of Management Studio, so you can try this. The other thing that you need, everybody's going to need, is this .NET Core Software Development Kit. This is a separate install from Visual Studio. So again, if you need to see the link, I'm in Weekly Learning Tools and Resources. And down underneath the Visual Studio downloads, I've got this item that says .NET Core SDK. So we're all going to need to install this. So if you open up this link, it takes you here. Fairly simple URL, .net.microsoft.com/download. This isn't a big file. It's not like Visual Studio. And what we want is this element, this item right here that I've got my cursor over under .NET Core 3.1 where it says Build Apps. There's this download .NET Core SDK. So this isn't a large file. This is the latest version of the software development kit. So no matter what operating system you're on, it's cross-platform, you'll want to download and install. This page should detect your operating system. So you'll want to go ahead and install this. So it's this one in the middle on the left. I know there's 6 buttons here. It's the one that says Download .NET Core SDK. So left column and the download button in the middle. We've got 2 options here. There's .NET Core and .NET Framework. We'll talk a little bit more about these a bit in a little bit, what the difference is. Although the difference is kind of highlighted briefly right on this page in front of us. So that install, you can just let it run. As I said, it won't take very long. So I'm going to go back to the weekly learning folder. And jump into the week 1 folder. Now, if you don't see this item, that's because you have a quick task you haven't completed yet. This item will be visible to you after, because I sent out a reminder announcement this morning. So in order to see the week 1 folder, you need to go to course information. And under here, the second item is reviewing the academic integrity policy. So what I want you to do is just click on that link if you haven't done it already. And it just sets out some terms. You know, sometimes when we have issues with students not submitting their own work, it's maybe because students aren't always clear on what they are and are not allowed to do. So this semester, I'm experimenting with trying to make this really clear right what the expectations and rules are right from the beginning of the semester. So again, under course information and getting started, if some of you have already done this, if you click the academic integrity policy and you click begin, you just need to give this a read over. And once you agree to the terms, then you'll be able to see the week 1 folder in weekly learning. I can't force you to agree to this. So if you disagree with it, then send me an email and we should have a conversation and maybe we can discuss what your concerns are with the conditions that are here. Okay, so once you complete that item and agree to those terms, you should then be able to see the week 1 folder inside of weekly learning. So this folder becomes visible once you agree to the policy. As I said, if you don't agree, then send me an email and we can talk about your concerns. So inside of the week 1 folder, if you've already completed this item, you can jump in here. So I want to give you a little bit of an overview of what ASP.NET is, how it works, how it's kind of different from the PHP framework that we used earlier. Okay. Normally, I'm not huge on PowerPoint slides, but I think it's probably helpful to have some notes to refer to from an online course. So I will try and do kind of some brief summary slides and post these each week on Blackboard. So the lesson 1 slides are here. There's not many. I'm just going to go over it kind of briefly. So ASP.NET's been around for a while. 2002, I bought the first version of Visual Studio.NET for the low price of, well, it was about $2,000 back then. And it came from an older technology Microsoft had created called Active Server Pages. That's where we have the name ASP. And the code was written in Visual Basic Script. So it was an interpreted language. It's very similar to PHP. Think of PHP without the curly braces and semicolons. So Microsoft used to use this old ASP technology, and they kind of were looking around for better ways. So they thought, how can we make our applications more secure, make them run faster, and make web development more like traditional desktop development, where developers could use object-oriented principles, and also we could write a single code base for an application and deploy it either to a web server as a web application or as a desktop application to be installed on people's desktops. So these were kind of the ideas, and one of the big features about ASP.NET was that it offers compiled code, and we'll talk more about that and how it's different from interpreted code. In 2008, they added support for MVC architecture. I'll talk about MVC today and get a handle on that, what it is. And then 4 years ago, they added .NET Core. So until 2016, ASP.NET was Windows only. You couldn't develop it or run it on Linux. You couldn't develop or run it on a Mac. So Microsoft finally saw the light and moved to cross-platform development back in 2016 with .NET Core. So largely, we tend to see .NET in big applications. So we see it a lot in government, large corporate enterprises, can be used for small applications, but .NET offers us as developers a lot of benefits. Number one, our code is compiled. So it's much faster and it's much more secure than interpreted code like PHP. We get to develop using Visual Studio, which many people say is sort of the king of web development environments. It has so many features and tools. It also automates tons of tasks. So Microsoft has done a great job at saying, what are the kind of grunt repetitive tasks web developers do over and over again, like building a login form, for example, setting up a shared header and footer. And they've baked all these things into a template so that we can focus on writing our application, and we can just pull in all these pre-built components and tools and then customize them the way we want. It uses MVC architecture, which again, we're going to get into today, and integrates really well with a lot of other Microsoft services. One of the built-in things it includes are all these components, including components for managing security. So Visual Studio gives us a ton of stuff as developers. So rather than starting projects from a blank slate, it gives us templates where we basically have an already running website right out of the box. These sites will include things like Bootstrap, jQuery, a shared header and footer. We don't have to use these things, but we can use them and customize them. It has built-in features for authentication, so automatically created registration login pages. We can enable two-factor authentication, social media login, and a lot of the code libraries are already included in Visual Studio. We also have runtime debugging, which means we can watch our server-side code execute and put breakpoints in it to evaluate the code as our page is loading and the code is executing. This makes debugging immeasurably easier. We've got a package manager where there's all sorts of third-party code libraries we can add. So let's say we want to add a Twitter feed to our application. We don't have to write the code ourselves. We can use the package manager to search for a code library that handles Twitter feeds, and we can add it to the project. And then we've got things like unit testing integration and version control with Git. All this stuff is built right into Visual Studio. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to do one quick activity before we take a break. So I emailed out an invitation link. So once you can get into the lesson 1 folder, bear with me for just a second. I just have to make this item available. So you did get an invite link to a whiteboard. I invited everybody in the class this morning. So you can use the link that's in there, or I just have to edit this item on Blackboard to make it public. So you can also get the link by just refreshing the week 1 folder on Blackboard. So the link is here. My internet's pretty slow. And bear with me, I want to make sure I gave you the link to the right board. So in Blackboard, I've assigned everybody to a group. So you should see the groups link in Blackboard. I've divided the class into 5 groups. Yes, Stephen, that's okay. Sorry, I'm just going to pause for a minute to read the chat. Diana, we're probably not going to create our own NuGet packages. That's a little bit beyond the scope of our course. That would be an advanced thing you could try to do, but we're certainly going to use Sub. Farouk, yes, there are actually templates that you can build an ASP.NET backend and a React frontend if you're building a single page application. There's also templates for Angular. There's some great tutorials on LinkedIn Learning by a developer named Elvis Trupia that shows you just how to do that. So there's We won't probably do that in this course, but if you're interested in doing React or Angular front end with the .NET backend, then be sure to check out those tutorials on LinkedIn Learn. So I've put everybody in a group. Everybody's in group a group 1 to 5. Yeah, Justin, we'll talk about some different. You can use GoDaddy, but we'll talk about the database in another week or two. I've got some other options for that as well. So in the board, if you check which group you're in Blackboard, you're in groups 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and I can see a few people starting to join the board. So if you're in group 1, your question is, what are some of the benefits of ASP.NET? So if you grab a sticky note over here, and you can make it the same color as your question. To take a minute to answer your question and also put your name in the sticky note, and then we'll kind of have a class whiteboard with some basic notes about ASP.NET. So this activity isn't going to be graded. Diana, you should have received an email from Miro this morning. Okay, I see. So Maggie's approved you. Okay, so Justin, check whether you're in group 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 on Blackboard. And then depending which group you're in, I want you to add a sticky note to the Miro board with an answer to the question. So if you're in group 4, then you'll add a sticky note in the 4th column and put some answers into the question. So I think what we'll do, I'm going to stop the video stream right now. There's probably no need for me to continue to stream this part. So what we'll do, I'll give you about 5 more minutes to post your answer on the Miro board. So do a little research and post your sticky in the appropriate column. Also be sure to put your name on the note. And then at about 11:55, we'll take a 10-minute break. So I'm going to stay in the WebEx room for now, but I'm going to stop the stream. So if you have questions, just post them in the WebEx chat.